We're back, and welcome back to United Taste of America. I'm Rick K. Jones, your host and guide. As you probably know, if you've been listening or if you're just joining us for the first time, this podcast series is part of the celebration of the America 250, and it's all about our culinary history of America. And really, the culinary history of America is the history of America. It really does tell the story of this giant bowl of gumbo called American cuisine that we talk about. So much of our cuisine was created by the immigrants that came here. In fact, folks, all of us came from somewhere else, including the Native Americans who crossed the Bering Sea. Everybody in our country came from someplace else, and they all brought their different cuisines, different techniques, and this all adds up to this wonderful thing we call American cuisine. And the state today is the state of Oregon, and Oregon was the destination for so many pioneers of so many different nationalities that were traveling, looking for fertile farmland, looking for places to fish, places to hunt, places for furs, all sorts of opportunities in Oregon. The famous Oregon Trail literally brought thousands upon thousands of people to this wonderful and beautiful state. This was, like every other place, a land of many, many Native American tribes. It was first explored by the Spanish. They came up from Mexico and by the coastline and explored. Then the British came and explored it. The Russians came and explored the coastline. What were they all looking for? They were looking for the Northwest Passage. They just were certain that there was a water passage that would take you from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Of course, it didn't exist, but they didn't know that, and they were looking for it. But what really changed the scope of history for Oregon was the famous exploration by Lewis and Clark. Thomas Jefferson commissioned those two to travel and map and to find, hopefully, the Northwest Passage. And they came up the Missouri River and then the Platte River, and then they crossed the Rocky Mountains, and they ended up on the Columbia River. And the Columbia River is really the heartbeat of the state of Oregon. And it was the river that led to what? The Pacific Ocean, and to those headwaters. And Lewis and Clark and Mr. Jefferson are going to play a role when we talk about our signature dish a little bit later today, about Oregon. The American financier, John Jacob Astor, he financed the first fur trading settlement in Oregon. He built a Fort Astoria, named for himself. And the little town now of Astoria, Oregon, is there literally on the Columbia River near where it meets the Pacific Ocean. Then the Oregon Trail opened the doors for settlement by farmers and others. And then so many came. Fertile farmland. Again, many came to fish because the Pacific Ocean and the Columbia River was just teeming with seafood, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But in 1859, Oregon became our 33rd state in the United States. We have a fun musical playlist today. The first song is the classic song from Animal House, Shout by the Isley Brothers. Now you're saying, where's the connection? They filmed Animal House in Eugene, Oregon at the University of Oregon. And if you come to a football game at the University of Oregon, at the end of the third quarter, they have the famous John Belushi video, and then they play Shout and sing Shout and have a really, really good time. For those of my era, for you baby boomers out there that all played in a garage band when you were kids, what was the first rock and roll song we all learned to play? It was Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. They're from Oregon. Then Bo Diddley The famous Bo Diddley has a great song on our playlist called Bo Diddley. A great guitarist. Later on, there was a famous Nike commercial, and Nike is headquartered in Beaverton, Oregon. Phil Knight was a student, a track star at the University of Oregon. His coach, and he formed a partnership to create Nike. And later on, Nike used, athletes like Michael Jordan and others, Steve Prefontaine, all kinds of great athletes as spokespersons. But they were wanting to do a cross-training shoe, a shoe that could do many, many things. So they went and got an athlete that played both professional football and professional baseball at the same time, Bo Jackson. And they did a classic commercial called Bo Knows, and it was music by Bo Diddley. And the last commercial, he's trying to play the guitar, and he's terrible at it. And Bo Diddley says, "Bo, you don't know diddly." Well, then the sequel came out not long after that, and Bo had learned to play the guitar. And the tagline was, "Bo does know diddly, don't he?" It was really, really a great ad, the great Bo Diddley. Greg Brown has a wonderful song called "I Must Be in Oregon." And finally, there's the classic Woody Guthrie Americana folk music standard, The Oregon Trail. That's our playlist for today. Well, some great foods come from Oregon. Let's start with if you have a sweet tooth. This is the home of the famous Voodoo Donuts. Voodoo Donuts originated in Portland, all over the state. Wonderful, wonderful chain of donut shops. They make my favorite donut, which is bacon and maple syrup. That salty, just cured, wonderful bacon with that wonderful maple syrup. It's just, one of those classic donuts. You could probably eat about a dozen of them with a good cup of coffee from that region. They're home to a couple of berries up there that grow naturally. They're the Marion berries. It's kind of a blackberry, and huckleberries are kind of a blueberry. And they pick them and serve them in a variety of ways, but they're really great for pies. And when you get a hot, warm berry pie, you're going to want some ice cream, and they have a special salt and straw ice cream on top. Ooh, that's pretty good. I'm getting hungry. They grow more hazelnuts, also known as filberts, in Oregon than any other place else in the world. We mentioned last week about hot dishes made with tater tots. Well, they make tater tots in Oregon at a place called Ore-Ida. What is Ore-Ida? It's the combination of Oregon and Idaho, and it's on the border, all those Idaho potatoes, and they make these famous tater tots there. They're also famous for something called pot chicken wings. These are grilled chicken wings with fish sauce, with Asian fish sauce. Really, really interesting dish. Haven't seen them other places. This is the home of a couple of great cheeses, a couple of very famous cheeses. There's the famous Tillamook cheddar cheese and the famous Oregon blue cheese that was invented in my birth year, 1954, by the Rogue Creamery. We've talked about wines in California, where they make great wines now in Oregon, especially Pinot Noirs in the Willamette Valley. They grow great grapes there, and they make wonderful Pinot Noirs, maybe the best in the world now, along with some other great wines that are there. Oregon, just full of natural resources. Eastern part of the state, very much agriculture, very much wine, grape growing. A lot of wheat grows there. A lot of produce is grown in Oregon. You get close to the coast, you're getting the great cheeses and the great seafoods. That are some of the great dishes of Oregon. And then there's the seafood. Y'all, the seafood in Oregon is amazing. Clams, salmon, oysters, and more. But there's one iconic seafood that really stands out, and that's the Dungeness crab. Dungeness crabs have this sweet, wonderful crab meat that is so good. Steamed crabs or crab salad. I always like to make sure that my Chia Pinot has Dungeness crab in it. You name it, they make it with Dungeness crab. But we went to a place called Salty's on the Columbia to eat and see how they make their very famous Dungeness crab macaroni and cheese. Now, I told you earlier, what does this have to do with Lewis and Clark and Mr. Jefferson? Well, according to lore, Thomas Jefferson created macaroni and cheese. Remember, he spent all that time in France and he fell in love with the famous French cheeses and also with the pastas that they were serving in Paris at the time. And supposedly he came back to Monticello and created the first macaroni and cheese. Then he sends Lewis and Clark off. They discover these famous Dungeness crabs in the Pacific Ocean. Let's put those two together, and we've got what I consider to be the best mac and cheese in the world. Right on the Columbia River is this classic restaurant called Salty's. You're going to love our video vignette because one of the things is Salty's has a collection of very famous and very whimsical art. All sorts of carvings, paintings, wall hangings. It's almost like an art exhibit in the restaurant itself. It's a very, very unique place. It literally sits on the Columbia River, and you look out the windows on the river into the state of Washington on the other side of the river. And so this is a great place for that famous mac and cheese with the famous cheese that they make there in Oregon. Great food there. This is a place where they like to celebrate the seasonality of seafood, and they do it with festivals. So when the Dungeness crab season starts, they have a festival called the You Crack Me Up Festival. When the famous halibut come into season, they have a festival called Just for the Halibut. And then the wild salmon, when the salmon make their run, they have their very famous Wild Ones salmon seafood festival. They do salmon really well because so many salmon continue to spawn in the Columbia River or rivers that lead into the Columbia. If you know about salmon, where they were born is where they return to lay their eggs. And so they come out of the fresh water as small fish. They go out into the Pacific Ocean and spend decades. And then when it's time to reproduce, they come back. Nobody knows how they know. How do they know to come back to the exact location where they were born? But they do that, and they make great stuff. So had a chance in the vignette to sit down with the general manager of Salty's, Laura Reeder, to talk about the history of the restaurant. She'd been there a long time. I've told you this so many times on this series. It doesn't take long to feel a culture of a place. And this place, people have worked there for decades. Chefs, cooks, waitresses, waiters, bartenders. This is one of those places that people just love being there. They've built a great culture at this restaurant. Great Oregon wines, obviously, from the bar. But they do make this amazing mac and cheese. Their chef is Josh Thornburn. Again, young fella, been there for a long time, became the executive chef. He took us into the kitchen, showed us how he makes it. So this is how he makes it. Take a little cooked Campanelli pasta. Campanelli pasta has little ridges on it, okay? So you want the ridges to be able to get the cheese to stick to it, the sauce to stick to it. Then he adds heavy cream, a combination of Oregon white and orange cheddar cheese to the pan. Then he adds the cooked and picked Dungeness crab, some fresh breadcrumbs, put it under the salamander to crisp up the breadcrumbs. Y'all, my son loves mac and cheese, maybe better than anything in the world. So we've eaten mac and cheese everywhere in the world. This is the best I've ever had. And Ryan will tell you this is the best he ever had. The best of the best. You know it's good when you eat the entire bowl of mac and cheese and you're looking for the last piece of bread to make sure that when you send it back, they don't even have to put it in the dishwasher because you've gotten everything out of it. That's how good this mac and cheese was. So you got to go to Salty's on the Columbia and get some salmon, get some chowder, and get the Dungeness crab mac and cheese. But where else should you eat in Oregon? Again, another great food state, but here's my 3 from me suggestions for this week. We talked about Eugene, where they filmed Animal House. That's where the University of Oregon is. Look, every college town worth its salt has what? That great go-to breakfast restaurant, the place that everybody goes to, usually to soak up a hangover, or to commiserate a bad grade, or to do whatever you've got to do. And the great breakfast restaurant in Eugene's is a place called the Glenwood. What do you want there? They make amazing omelets. Big, great, fluffy, yummy, great omelets again, in Eugene at the Glenwood. One of the oldest restaurants in the state of Oregon is in Portland. It's called Jake's Famous Crawfish. Started in 1892. This is one of the great seafood restaurants, again, in the world. Start with crawfish corn fritters. Crawfish corn fritters. Then get the Dungeness crab dip with that just baked sourdough bread. Then you got a couple choices. If you're there with somebody like your wife, your spouse, your husband, your friend, whatever, one of you order one dish and one of you order the other dish, and about halfway through you can switch. So here are the 2 dishes you got to order. They do a horseradish crusted steelhead. Now think about salmon and that rich, fatty, then you add that wonderful base of horseradish to offset that fattiness. Y'all, I'm telling you, it's really good. But the other dish is my favorite, and it's their very famous bouillabaisse. What's in it? Mussels, crab, clams, prawns, scallops, and salmon. It's amazing, the bouillabaisse at Jake's Famous Crawfish. And finally, here's a cool place in Astoria. It's called the Bow Picker. They took an old abandoned boat and they moved it into a city park. And right in the city park is this really historic looking old boat. And that's the restaurant. And they serve out of the window there only one thing: fish and chips. The best, freshest fish with just fried, twice fried, in fact, French fries. It's a great place, the Bow Picker in Astoria. So, folks, that's the great state of Oregon. Great scenery, amazing wines, wonderful seafood, and that Dungeness crab mac and cheese from Salty's on the Columbia. We hope to see you back here next week on United Taste of America from the state where there's no place like home, Kansas.